Well, thank you for being here on this panel, which is one of the most important topic of the space, bringing bridging performance between CeFi and DeFi. That's been the topic for almost 15 or 20 years so far. Well, my name is Julien Bouteloup. I'm the founder and CEO of StakeCapital. We've been in the space for more than a decade. We do investment. We have a venture studio, advisory, lobbying. I've been involved in multiple different projects like Curve Finance, Rec News, StakeDAO, and many others. As I mentioned, we'll be talking about the performance between CeFi and DeFi, and we have an amazing panel. So if you can make introduction of yourself in less than 1 minute, that'd be great because we only have 30 minutes.
Sounds good. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Smokey, co-founder, CEO at Berachain. A little bit of background on myself. I've been in crypto for the better part of the last decade. Originally started my career on the very opposite side of things in biotech and natural sciences. Got involved first buying Bitcoin and ETH back in 2015, 16. Then a bunch of shitcoins that did not do so well in 2017, 2018, and then have been all over DeFi since 2019, I'd say, in the good old days of SNX and more. So a little bit of context on Berachain. Berachain's EVM identical L1, turning liquidity into security and using it to power the application layer. As we see it, Berachain is a massive bet on applications succeeding and using chains to power the apps that live on top of them. That's high level.
Kain?
Hey guys, I'm Kain, founder of Synthetix and founder of Infinex. So Synthetix was a DeFi protocol back in the day, like OG DeFi summer era. And Infinex is a platform that is looking to do exactly what we're talking about on this panel, bridge the gap between the UX of CeFi, particularly centralized exchanges, and DeFi. So our goal is to make it as easy to use DeFi applications as it is to use Binance.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jakob, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Clearpool Finance. Clearpool is a on-chain private credit marketplace. So we've been doing loans for all different types of institutions, mainly trading firms, from crypto trading firms to also some larger TradFi institutions. We've been around since 3 years. We've done around $800 million worth of loans. And recently we have, new direction. We're actually building out our own RWA ecosystem. The idea is to make, RWAs sexier, easier, and more accessible for retail users.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eric. I'm CEO and co-founder of Amnis Finance. So we are the largest liquid staking on Aptos with about $200 billion DPL. So we facilitate easy staking of Aptos across the whole ecosystem. My background was from TradFi, so I spent like 6 years both as a trader in investment banking and then hedge fund manager on the high yield distressed credit. And then for the last 7 years, I've been a builder, and for the last 3 years, been very active in the DeFi space.
Can I ask a question quickly?
For sure.
Are you a Move dev?
I'm sorry?
Are you a Move dev?
I'm a Move dev? No, I'm not a dev. My background.
Okay, there's no Move devs. I've not met one. We've been trying to find them. They don't exist.
Actually, pretty easier to find.
Oh, okay. You got to introduce me to some Move devs.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Okay. So I was put on the panel as moderator last minute. So if you guys have any questions, also please don't hesitate to jump in, okay? Or entertain the panel.
I got you.
Let's start with section 1 that I call brutal truths. When was the last time that you used a DeFi app and you told yourself, fuck, this is still broken? And what was the problem?
I mean, I think that's pretty much almost every time I use a DeFi app, to be quite brutally honest. And I don't think that that's like an uncommon take either. I think right now the issue is that I think over the last year and change, a lot of people doing things on chain, whether they're sophisticated or not, have almost been molded into like this pump fund type mentality where they're very much used to clicking a button or two and looking for a lottery ticket. Like I think the old days of constructing more nuanced strategies and trying to have 20 degrees of farms and understanding all the different degrees of freedom within various DeFi games has very much fallen off a cliff from what I've felt at least. And nowadays people just want, press button, get dopamine, right? I don't know if that's necessarily the right thing, but I think the user behavior has very much been validated. And with that, I think we're going to see a lot more people moving towards, either just very elegant zapping and wrapping solutions, or much more work around the account abstraction, social login, etc. side, along with mobile experiences.
Yeah, the most recent experience that I had with this was trying to bet on the Synthetix stablecoin DPEG. There's a new protocol called a new prediction market, basically, and so I tried to ape into this market to bet on the SUSD peg, and I had a hot wallet that had some like money on ETH, and I needed to bridge it to Base, and then there were gas issues, and I literally spent like 15 minutes messing around with it, and just eventually abandoned ship. I was like, this is not worth it. So I still think that we have significant orchestration problems in the way that wallets operate today in DeFi. It's one of the things that Infinex is trying to solve. We're trying to improve the orchestration of these kinds of transactions. It's not even the transaction that you want to do in the application. It's getting the funds onto the right chain into the application itself in the right form. That's the challenge often. So, you need the right flavor of USDC, or, this app takes USDT, that app takes, Honey. And then you need to be able to get from one to the other really easily. And that ends up becoming the most effortful aspect of using an application, when it should just be you turn up the application and funds are there, they're available. You've got inbuilt bridging and you can just do things really quickly. So that's the thing that I think is still one of the biggest frustrations, is wallets don't really handle this new multi-chain world that we live in, where there are hundreds of L2s and L1s. And so yeah, we need to improve that if we want to get people to use applications more, which is, I think, an important goal for the industry.
Well, Jakob and Warwick, if you had to onboard non-crypto sibling, parents, friends, or partner, would you invite them to use DeFi or Binance or Revolut? Still today, 15 years later, after Bitcoin was created,
I think that was actually one of my recent experiences, that I wanted to introduce a friend to a DeFi opportunity. I think it was some Pando PT opportunity, which was pretty good, and
you start with PT.
What the hell are you doing to your friend? You're like, oh, let's do Pendle.
I said like a non-crypto and non-sophisticated user.
Basically, he found out there was some interesting yield opportunity. I was about to sort of like start explaining him how to use a wallet, and I realized that my patience wasn't really. I didn't have enough patience to actually do that, so I ended up saying like, never mind, I'll do it for you. And, you just pay me the money in fiat, basically, right? Because, yes, I absolutely agree. Using DeFi, not even Pando, but just, getting ETH on a wallet is a very, very difficult user experience. It's something that's very difficult to grasp for users. And I remember my first time, and I was also completely overwhelmed. And, it's crazy that, many, many years later, nothing really changed.
Exactly. Eric, you want to add something?
Yeah, when you say about it, every time I got a newbie, try to introduce them to crypto, the first thing I always tell them to like open an app, Binance, right? I think why I always point to Binance, because the user experience is like much smoother if you compare to DeFi. I guess DeFi, the problem is like, if you talk to a newbie, right? You say, hey, let's say Aptos, open this, and say like, what wallet? And to tell them, hey, Petra wallet, and they need to download it down, right? And they top up the money like, okay, so where's the gas fee? Why cannot make the transaction, And if they happen to have money on the wrong chain and that sort of thing. So it's definitely, it's a lot of hurdle to explain to a newbie how to use the product. Liquid staking, I think, is something more simple. You just press a button, you stake the native token, because you stake native token. So you tend to have the money, and not a lot of things could go wrong. But I think another layer with DeFi versus CeFi, that with CeFi, I feel like I'm in a protected environment. It's hard for it to go wrong. With DeFi, it could very well be, right? If I sign the wrong contract, it grants access to my whole wallet, and terrible thing could happen. So every time I sign a contract, I become very paranoid. Like, okay, what contract have I signed with this wallet? What right am I having great ground? Because it might not happen instantaneously, right? It might come back to hurt you later, because I heard of those incidents before, and I think those are the kind of thing of DeFi that currently is like, it's very hard for the average user to get into with all those risks on the back of your mind, because it make you afraid to be comfortable enough to put sizable amount of capital in.
Okay, so let's wrap up section 1. So basically, the recap is DeFi is still extremely difficult to use and hasn't much change over the past 15 years or 10 years. So let's go into section 2, innovations closing the gap. What's the most promising innovation you've seen recently in a space that you believe can tremendously change DeFi in order to bringing the gap between CeFi and DeFi in terms of technology or UX or whatever?
That's a good one. I think we'll see.
Say Infinex. Come on, buddy.
I was gonna hit the show a little bit later. You gotta let me warm up, I do think that there's a couple degrees of freedom here, right? I think on one hand, with Pectra going live and a lot better support around the account abstraction smart wallet side, we'll probably see some improvements in UX, because in my mind, one of the biggest issues with DeFi is balancing that usability and security, right? Where, you're trying to LP and stake that LP token, you're probably having to click approve on 2 different tokens. You're having to click approve on actually depositing that LP. Then you're having to click approve again on staking. To some extent, these solutions like Enso, et cetera, that allow you to zap directly into position are helpful and have been like a big step in the right direction. But I don't think that they're ubiquitous by any means. And I don't think that they are like the end game. I think, to give Kain his flowers, the work that they're doing at Infinex is great there. And I think that they're thinking a lot about how to make things usable and take a solid shot at sexes. But in my mind, the biggest thing is making people click less buttons. And, the best answer to that I've seen so far is these 7702 account abstraction base layer solutions that balance, okay, this is not allowing me to rug all my tokens, but this is also not making me click 20 buttons in order to get a simple action done.
Yeah, I think the fundamental issue is that people in the space have to choose between building infra or building an application. And if you build an application, you're constrained by the infrastructure that's available to you. You're constrained by needing to support browser wallets and and embedded wallets and other infrastructure providers that are there. And you can't really change that. You're just trying to build an app. You can't change the app store. You just have to build it to the specifications of the app store. And if you're an infra provider, you can't really change the way that the infra communicates with the applications, because then you will have your own siloed thing and you won't be backwards compatible with all of the existing apps out there. So we're in this kind of stalemate where no one can really break out of this equilibrium. And so the only way to do it is to basically build your own siloed application that's full stack, that has its own wallet signing, its own infrastructure. And there actually is really good infrastructure like 7702. There are a bunch of different solutions, but you have to kind of cobble them together into your own solution that is for your own application. And for most app developers, that's just not a viable strategy. You just want to build an application. So that's kind of the fundamental challenge that we have, that if you're building a CeFi application, you don't have. You're building a full stack application as a centralized exchange. It's why centralized exchanges still dominate today, because they have the ability to control, the entire stack of the application and not make compromises.
Eric, maybe if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I guess the question was like, what's the biggest innovation DeFi, right?
You've seen so far,
So far, I think I might be a bit biased since we're staking summit and I do LSD. I think LSD is the biggest innovation so far. And why I think so? Because even TradFi, interest rates is probably the greatest invention of money, right? When interest rate is part of it, because interest rate basically is the cost of money. So when you think about liquid staking, before that, all that TVL is locked into the protocol, right? Before Lido come on LSD and ETH come, all that TVL stuck there. And if you look at the chart of, let's say, RV, right? The biggest collateral at RV at the time was ETH before the Shanghai upgrade. But after the Shanghai upgrade, the biggest collateral become SDE, right? And you see a massive growth in terms of TVL across Ethereum ecosystem and other ecosystem for those suit as well. Because what liquid staking unlock a very beautiful thing is credit expansion, right? Once I put my, let's say SDE, let's say in RV, and I try to loop that yield, right? So for example, let's say LTV of 67%. So every ETH I do and I loop it to the max, I can loop it up to 3 times at 67% LTV. So every 1 ETH become 3 ETH in the TVL, the whole ecosystem, right?
Well, this is good for DeFi players, but for TradFi players, they're not like using LST, LRT. I was more thinking about project like, for example, Morpho, what they created with the Vault structure, operators, curators, which is really like getting close to what TradFi has been using for decades, where you can deposit liquidity and then automatically have asset management or yield optimizations. Do you want to add something about this point?
Sorry,
We've seen in DeFi a big shift, and I think what Morpho has been doing has been completely like redesigning the DeFi landscape, because you have operators or service providers that can actually leverage the stack in order to provide or optimize liquidity, and then use liquidity from traditional players, banks or whatsoever. And then have those different people that have different interests and different incentives, but can still leverage the technology.
Yeah. I think, I guess the one of the biggest news of our industry was obviously that the largest asset manager, issued a money market via Securitize, and then I think that really sort of kickstarted a little bit this whole sort of like RWA, progress and small boom, I would say. So far it's mainly tokenized T-bills, but I think, they came in, and then a lot of, different more DeFi native players could actually use that infrastructure to basically build different types of products. I'm talking about the likes of Ondo, Usual, et cetera. And I think that was, the first real, or like, it was a good, example of how sort of like TradFi can build a product that's still very institutional grade, very permissioned. And then you have the DeFi side that relies on that and brings it and builds something that's a little bit more DeFi native and also appealing to retail users.
Good.
One thing I would add to that, Julien, is that, a little bit to Eric's point, I think that one of the things that is helping to bridge that gap a little bit, though not necessarily directly DeFi, is actually some of these like validator in a box type companies, in terms of like, the work that a Figment or Kiln, et cetera, might do. Just because when you think about a lot of these larger institutional players, whether that be sort of a large bank, or whether that's a Saudi telecom or a football team or whatever it might be, they aren't scared necessarily as much by the prospect of dipping their feet with a validator, right? Before getting deeper into other DeFi strategies, et cetera, because they see something that looks a little bit like, cloud computing, or basically, distributed networking that they understand in their terms. And they say, okay, cool, I put up these tokens and I get more tokens. I understand this model. So I think that actually validators, as annoying as they might be at times, can be an interesting, jump off point into the rest of the world of actually using crypto for larger institutional players as well.
Jumping back on your point, Kain, you said, I think if you want to win in the space, you have to kind of like own the stack or build a mega app. But is this vision not actually against decentralization or cross-chain operability, where you have service provider that specialize in wallet services? For example, you could have iOS or Apple with secure enclave and that comes abstraction, and then you have exchanges. But you're saying basically you actually have to have everything in one app. It's best. It's better. Like, what are you seeing, for example, in Asia with WeChat, or like those guys are moving into mega app?
I think if you want to improve the user experience, and this is, we started Infinex with this view of we're non-custodial, but we want the best UX. And it forced us into this position of rebuilding a lot of this infra and combining it in a way that you couldn't do if you're building a pure dApp, a stateless dApp as they're typically built. And the other thing is, look at dApps today. As we started trying to figure out how Infinex could connect to external dApps, we had this really funny moment where inside of Infinex, it's omni-chain by default. you can see all the chains. You go in, your wallet is just a multi-chain wallet. You don't care which network your assets are on. And then we went to Aave, and we were like, wait a second, there's this like big drop-down menu at the top where you select all of the different markets on different chains, and the dApp itself can only have in context one chain at a time, which is pretty crazy, right? Like, so now if you're trying to decide which of the ETH markets are the best ETH market, you literally have to like click through all of the markets on Arbitrum and Base and Optimism.
So you think like this year will be the year where we have chain abstraction, like you go to the app like Aave, Morpho, or like Infinex, or
well,
whatever.
you can't have chain abstraction in this model, right? This single chain view model that wallets force dApps into. You can't have a multi-chain dApp, and so the question is, how do you actually build a signing infrastructure that will enable multi-chain dApps? And that wallet, that shift in wallet form factor, I think is going to be the thing that is going to enable a new wave of applications to be made, because we have hundreds of chains now. And so the idea that, you know, a dApp can only show you one chain at a time is insane. But it's very hard to break out of that. So we broke out of it, and now we're trying to figure out how to let other dApps break out of it.
Well, I think it's the same as using a centralized exchange. You don't even matter. Doesn't matter which blockchain you're operating with. Then you can get the token in Ethereum and then leave it in Solana. You don't even know which chain or which blockchain you were using.
Yeah, I mean, centralized exchanges are the best wallet technology that we have today, right?
And they are not using decentralization.
Yeah, it's just the trade-off is, you know, not your keys, not your coins sort of thing, right? But if you're okay with that, it's the best UX by far. You can't compete with it.
Do you guys want to add something, Eric or Jakob?
Yeah, I mean, I think I 100% agree. I also think that 99% of people probably do not really care about decentralization. I think 99% of people are completely overwhelmed with the responsibility of, you know, keeping their seed phrase somewhere safe.
Not your key, not your fund, right?
Yeah. So I mean, it sounds simple, but, you know, in order to manage that well, it's actually...
Well, I mean, we had this in the 20s, and there was gold people hiding their gold behind their bed, and then we had custody solution because it was extremely stupid to do so.
Yeah, so I guess there, you know, you kind of need to find like a compromise. On the other hand, obviously, you know, I'm in you know, we're doing lending, right? So obviously, the great user experience back in the days was obviously on Celsius, for example, right? It was very easy. It was way better user experience than on Aave and Compound, etc. But you know, we all knew how that
That's one little trade-off.
Yeah, it was a black box. So, you know, there's pros and cons. I do think that we need to find a little bit of a middle way if we really want to onboard retail, right? Because also, I think everyone who is really doing much in DeFi knows that there isn't really much retail in DeFi, right? All of the liquidity is coming from a few whales and yield funds, etc., that are sort of like, you know, looping that around. So I guess, you know, we need to find a middle ground, and that middle ground should be what's going to be the winning formula. But we didn't find it yet.
Want to add something now?
No, I think they cover everything.
I think the issue is that when we were building out the original DeFi protocols, right, we had an audience of enthusiasts who had very particular tastes, right, very niche tastes around decentralization, censorship resistance, etc. And so we had to build for that audience. And that audience was like 10,000 people. And then we hit the ceiling of that audience, and our solution was, let's try and make more of these enthusiasts, which didn't go very well because the average user doesn't care about decentralization. They don't care about censorship resistance. They just want good functionality and easy to use. And so, you know, the next step for us, I think, from a DeFi perspective, is figure out not how to make more enthusiasts or how to educate people. You know, we had this arc where we were like, we just need to educate people, like just a little bit more education, just one more, you know, blog post or whatever. And it didn't really move the dial. We didn't create more enthusiasts. So we need to figure out a way to build for a different audience that doesn't care about the thing.
You're saying that in order for DeFi to succeed, we need to get rid of our ideology, which is
not, I don't think we need
So
to...
selling more meme coin, more...
No. I don't think we should get rid of our ideology, because the ideology is what enables the technology to be good, right? The low barriers to entry, the permissionlessness, the composability, that's what allows us to build really good shit, right? But if the trade-off of doing all of that stuff is that it's unusable for anyone other than an enthusiast, then we have capped out the audience, right? So we have to find a way to thread the needle between all of that amazing stuff and easy to use.
Yeah, and don't you guys think that the reason also why DeFi hasn't been so easy to use or so prominent in traditional finance is because we have all those different ecosystems that are fighting each other. Like, if you think about it, if we aiming for agnostic chain, it means that we remove the name of the blockchain. We remove like Ethereum, Solana, or whatever, and the user actually don't care. So by nature, those different ecosystems, they have no incentive to have chain agnostic, because then they will lose their market cap, they will lose their user, they will lose their ideology, they will lose their fidels. So indirectly, we're fighting with TradFi and also fighting internally with ourselves.
If you look at TradFi, though, there are many different infrastructure providers in the stack, right? Every TradFi firm, whether it's a fintech business or like an OG bank.
But in TradFi, they're not trying to bridge between TradFi. Google will never try to find a bridge to Apple or to...
Sure. But they have infrastructure providers who provide services to them, right? Like they have database providers, they have, cloud services, and they pay for those services to offer to the end user features and functionality. And so, the idea that the database you choose needs to be like prominently displayed in the app is insane, right? We have that in crypto today because of all of the reasons that you said, but at the limit, it seems weird that you would care which blockchain it's running on, other than...
It's like saying, oh, let's use HTTP or SMTP.
Yeah.
No, when you use WhatsApp,
I just
TikTok.
want the best, it's either WebSockets or, I just want the best protocol for the thing that I'm doing, right? And so, the chains should be competing on how they're built, how the consensus is built, how they aggregate liquidity, all of those things that are actually going to provide utility to the end user is what they should be competing on. But at the moment, we're competing on who has the best cult, which is fine. I'm here for it.
Yeah. So we have 2.5 minutes left. What do you guys think? What will be the DeFi experience in 2030? Like, what do you think? This is in less than 5 years. I'm not sure if you guys realize, but maybe you guys want, Eric or Jakob, you want to jump in?
Are you Justin Drake? Are you aping Justin Drake? 2030? Really?
2030.
That's triggering.
That's 49. That's 49 this week, but let's do 30. Let's do 5 years away from now. What do you guys think will happen in DeFi, UX versus CeFi? Will actually CeFi absorb DeFi, or DeFi will be able to get more market shares of TradFi? I mean,
I think the beauty of DeFi, right? I mean, that's why the space moves so fast. Is that because there's no regulation right now, right? As a startup, you start to sit down, you think, oh, this is pretty cool. You can earn extra a few 10% extra yield, and then you put it on, and then it's live, right? The CeFi process, I mean, it's entirely different, because I speak from my own experience. Like in my country, they try to legalize crypto now, so that now they start talking about centralized change. But like even centralized chain, like the thing you think is so simple, it's been around for 10 years. It's a big debate, right? What pair would you list? Would you allow for capital outflow and all of that, right? There's so many things. That's why CeFi, I think, moves so slow. I think the beauty of DeFi, as we discuss, is like that because there's no regulation barrier to entry, right? It's pretty much, you think of something, it's amazing. If your product team will hire it up next month, you can have a product live, and very quickly you can get traction and you get users.
Yeah, but if you think about it, the biggest success that we've seen in DeFi are projects that are actually becoming CeFi, or adopting CeFi behaviors. That's what we've seen.
I think right now what we see is like the two sides focusing on different area. As a CeFi guy, I think the biggest pie, if they look at it now, I used to be on the TradFi side, and back then 2017 I was at Elliott, one of the world's largest hedge fund, and the hedge fund manager like, there's no money there, right? Bitcoin was at 20K, and then for them that's no money. But now Bitcoin 100K, there's money, and the biggest money pie for them is Bitcoin ETF. right? Like Solana ETF, that's the biggest pie of money, right? It's a DeFi world. You know, if you look at the biggest DeFi, RV probably make a few $100 million, 100 million a year in fees. That's still quite small pie for CeFi to go after. So I think it's still going to have its own niche. I think there will be a time for DeFi to mature more.
Okay, next question. Who will onboard the next billion users? Like Jakob, you want to like a Coinbase, a wallet, a CeFi, or a protocol that we haven't seen yet?
I think generally the space probably needs more Web2 people, less finance people to actually focus less on creating good sort of like tokens at markets, and maybe we focus more on just creating regular good products. So yeah, I would say one of the large sort of like Web2 companies probably needs to step in and.
So for you, the next billion user in DeFi will be a CeFi product.
It would be a CeFi product, a DeFi product that feels
like Telegram.
That needs to feel like
CDFi.
CeDeFi.
Yeah.
Prediction. So a name or a project or protocol.
No, I'm memeing. I don't believe in CDFi, but
yeah. We'll add something. I think we're running out of time anyway. Yeah.
I mean, hey, my take on all this is more or less that I think that in the future, DeFi will look a little bit more like WeChat, kind of like what you alluded to before, right? And we'll see people using crypto in a manner in which they don't necessarily realize that they're using crypto, as in a high yield savings account in your bank might be somewhere in Aave, right? I think that we'll see those edges blur a lot more. And I think similar to Jakob's point, I think that the leaders in that space will likely be people who have distribution. And maybe that's like a mid-curve take, but I very much think that what crypto as a whole fails at the most right now is making people give a shit about crypto as a whole in a constructive manner. As in, it's always like the weird dudes who are like getting hacked or blown up. It's never the people who are making payments more accessible. It's never people who are solving problems in third world countries. It's never easy access to credit, etc. that dominates the narrative. And I think that if we start using crypto for use cases that might have a little bit more end game maturity, with effective distribution,
like buy food or pay rent,
like just shit that actually takes advantage of what you can do in crypto that you can't do as easily in TradFi, right? I think the payments rails are obvious. I think the access to credit is obvious. I think the ability to aggregate large sums of capital and distribute large sums of capital is very obvious. And I think that a lot of people are, we're so like messed, like we're so lost in our own like Ponzi games at times. Yeah, amongst the 5,000 people that are hanging out with us, to think, okay, what happens if we think about the 500,000 or the 5 million, right? So, like, I think that an example of something that could go a lot farther than it is right now is something like PayPal, right? They have, PYUSD. They have a massive application that's one of the, OG global payment systems. You can build around that stack.
I think they're going to kick us off the stage now.
Okay, thank you. Round of applause for the panelists, guys. Thanks.